I left home empty-handed. Now they remember my name. The greatest deception isn't the one a stranger plays on you, it's the lie your own family tells you about your worth. I'm Alex, 34, and for nearly a decade, my name was synonymous with failure, a ghost in my own house. I walked out of that life with nothing but the clothes on my back. Now, the world knows my name, and suddenly, they remember who I am. For 25 years, I lived under the meticulous supervision of Victor, 63, my father, a man whose life was built on the concrete certainty of corporate law, and Carla, 61, my mother, whose primary concern was the impeccable image of the sterling family at the country club. Their masterpiece, their greatest achievement, was my sister, Sophia, 36. She was everything I was not, an investment banker with a guaranteed salary, a perfect house, and a life as predictable and profitable as a government bond. I was the variable they couldn't control, the risk they couldn't tolerate. My obsession wasn't law or banking, it was the abstract, agonizingly complex future of energy. I was working on Helios, a radical new generation of solar array technology designed to finally make decentralized, high-efficiency power a reality. It was a project that demanded faith, patience, and zero guaranteed income. To my family, it was a joke. The dismissal was never a screaming match, it was the quiet, constant pressure of disappointment. Dinner table conversations revolved around Sophia's portfolio gains or Victor's firm mergers. When the focus shifted to me, the air would freeze. Victor would clear his throat, his professional demeanor barely masking his scorn. Still tinkering with those panels, Alex. You're 30, your sister is buying her second investment property. You need a job with health insurance, not a workshop in the garage. Carla's disapproval was softer but more pervasive. She'd apologized to her friends on the phone for my extended gap year, claiming I was simply taking a necessary pause before entering a lucrative field. She couldn't admit her son was pursuing a dream that didn't generate immediate, marketable status. I was a stain on the family's perfectly ironed reputation. The cruelest part was the subtle sabotage. I remember spending 2 months soldering micro-inverters for a prototype. I came home one evening to find the fragile array piled carelessly on the driveway. Carla had needed the space to set up a display for one of her charity events. She didn't see components, she saw clutter. She didn't apologize, she just told me to be more careful about leaving my toys out. The lack of malicious intent was somehow worse than outright hatred. It meant my work, my passion, was so insignificant to them that its destruction didn't even register as an inconvenience. What would you do when the people closest to you treat your most profound ambition as disposable junk? I realized my worth to them was strictly tied to my compliance. I tried to distance myself, taking low-paying internships at boutique architecture firms that focused on sustainability. My income was meager, but my purpose was absolute. I was barely scraping by, and the financial reality of my life only confirmed my family's worst fears, and their contempt. I tried to keep them informed of my progress, the small, critical wins that meant the world to me. I won a local grant for a public space design. I was invited to present at a small regional conference. When I told Eleanor, her only response was to ask if the conference provided free accommodation, because, as she put it, you really need to start being more fiscally responsible, Julian. Ethan, ever the pragmatic older brother, offered advice that felt like a slap. He suggested I abandon my artistic nonsense and apply for a facilities management role at his firm. It's steady money, Julian, he stated over the phone, his voice devoid of empathy. The kind of job where you can afford your own bills and stop worrying mom and dad. The message was clear. My ambition was a sign of my immaturity, and my pursuit of a meaningful career was a direct attack on their peace of mind. The emotional burden I felt was overwhelming. I knew I was the family secret, the one they glossed over when talking to friends. I saw the relief in their eyes every time I declined a family dinner. My absence made their perfection easier to maintain. I was a failure in their definition, and they saw me as leeching their emotional energy and resources. I remember one Christmas when Richard gave Ethan a 6-figure investment portfolio, congratulating him on his sound financial judgment. My gift, a few days later, was a book on budgeting for young professionals. It wasn't the lack of money that hurt, it was the symbolic weight of the message. Ethan received trust, I received instruction. I received disappointment. What would you do when every attempt to share your true passion is met not with anger, but with cold, financial analysis and thinly veiled contempt? I started withdrawing completely. I stopped sharing my life, stopped asking for advice, and stopped trying to bridge the gap. The only thing I clung to was my work, my dream to design something truly impactful. That dream wasn't just my career, it was the proof that their narrow view of success was wrong. It was my shield and my weapon. Part 3. The cold decision and the exit. The final breaking point occurred when I was 26. I had been working in secret for almost a year on a competition submission that could change everything, the commission to design a new, eco-friendly arts complex for a major city council. The design was revolutionary, incorporating kinetic energy capture and vertical gardening. It was the distillation of everything I believed in. To submit the final physical model and renderings, I needed exactly $10,000 for materials, printing, and presentation costs. I walked out of the back door, into the cold September night, with exactly $42 in my pocket and the burning certainty that I would never ask them for anything again. I left home with nothing, but I carried the most powerful fuel in the world, the debt of their abandonment. The furnace of independence. The next 3 years were a blur of cold, hunger, and grinding. I didn't just leave home, I vanished. They didn't call the police. They didn't search. They didn't send a single text message asking if I was safe. Their peace of mind was instantly restored by my absence. I was erased. I lived first in a derelict storage unit I rented cheap, sleeping next to my components. The smell of dust and stagnant air was my constant companion. I worked multiple minimum wage jobs, delivery driver, graveyard shift cashier, just to cover the storage fee and keep my components running. Every hour I spent coding and refining Helios was an act of defiance. The pain of Victor's refusal was a physical entity in the room, constantly reminding me that failure was not an option because failure meant confirming their judgment. I had to succeed, not for wealth, but for my soul. I finally scraped together the funding for the patent, selling a small software utility I'd developed on the side. That moment, the day the patent was filed, was the true victory, secured entirely by my own blood, sweat, and credit card debt. It was the proof that I could create value outside their system. I survived on cheap coffee, ramen, and the memory of Carla prioritizing a charity event over my prototype. My social life ceased to exist. My entire identity was fused with my work. I learned resilience, tenacity, and the brutal clarity that comes from having absolutely no safety net. I was entirely self-made, built from scratch on the foundation of their abandonment. If the lack of family support forced you to succeed through impossible hardship, would you ever consider giving them credit for teaching you toughness? I never reached out, and neither did they. For 3 years, the silence from the Sterling family was absolute, confirming that their love was only for the version of me that complied with their definition of success. The version of me who was struggling, hungry, and fighting for a dream was irrelevant, disposable. That silence was my ultimate freedom. It told me I owed them nothing, not even communication. The explosion of success came with shocking speed. At 34, Helios was no longer a prototype, it was a fully functional, patented technology with documented energy efficiency numbers that exceeded every industry standard. Word got out through the scientific community, and within months, 3 global energy conglomerates were vying to acquire the company I had built from a single laptop in a storage unit. I sold Helios to Omnigrid Energy for a staggering, undisclosed sum, a number that ran into the hundreds of millions. I went from a man sleeping next to cardboard boxes to an industry legend and a multi-millionaire in one signature. I didn't just achieve stability, I achieved the kind of transformative, disruptive wealth my family could never even conceptualize. The first thing I did wasn't buy a mansion or a sports car, I bought a sprawling, beautiful, soundproofed penthouse office suite overlooking the entire city. My success was built on silence, and I made sure my new environment reflected that peace. For almost a year, I kept my success completely private. I changed my contact details and let my old ones expire. I wanted to achieve the ultimate prize, enjoying my victory in peace, without their input, validation, or judgment. The peace was the greatest wealth of all. The silence was finally mine, not theirs. However, a profile piece eventually ran in a national business magazine, detailing the acquisition, the technology, and the eccentric, intensely private founder, Alex Sterling. The valuation was mentioned, confirming the scale of my success. The wall of my anonymity, the one I had built so carefully, finally crumbled. The phone call came 4 hours later. It was Sophia. The voice on the other end was too loud, too cheerful, too desperate. She didn't ask how I was. She launched into an elaborate monologue about how she had always known I had the drive, and how she and her husband had been watching my progression with immense pride. She spoke as if she had been my secret, silent supporter all along, conveniently forgetting she had recommended I quit my tinkering to become a facilities manager. The emails from Victor and Carla were even more jarring. They were filled with the forced, unnatural affection they had never once demonstrated in my youth. Victor wrote about how he had deliberately fostered my independence by declining the initial funding, a classic case of tough love, designed to push me out of the nest. Carla suddenly recalled the creative chaos of the garage, reframing the discarded prototype as the brilliant beginnings of a national phenomenon. They weren't claiming the man who had suffered and won, they were claiming the status and money that came with being related to the successful man. They didn't remember Alex, they remembered the Sterling name, now gilded with hundreds of millions. The attempts to reclaim me were systematic and nauseating. Carla started calling me Sonny, a term she hadn't used since I was in primary school, and demanded I attend an exclusive charity gala. She didn't invite me, she instructed me. She wanted to parade my success, my validation of her motherhood, in front of the people who had once seen me as her social shame. Victor's call was the most professional and most insulting. He finally revealed the real reason for the sudden influx of affection. His law firm was facing a major internal lawsuit, one that required an immediate, massive capital injection to survive the litigation. He needed me to write a check, not as a father, but as a potential creditor. He was asking me to bail out the very system he used to oppress me. I listened to him detail his predicament, using the same cold, calculated language he had used when refusing me $15,000. He spoke of risk mitigation and asset deployment. He didn't ask for a favor, he proposed a business arrangement, entirely devoid of personal warmth or regret. I felt the immense, heavy weight of the power I now held. I could save his entire life, his career, his reputation, the very things he cherished and protected at my expense. I could be the hero he never let me be. I declined, using his exact words. I told him my new firm's fiduciary duty prevented me from deploying capital into legacy entities with high speculative risk. I closed the conversation by stating, that kind of investment requires collateral, Victor. All you have is hope. The silence on his end of the phone was the greatest reward I had ever received. But the emptiness remained. I had proven them wrong. I had won the ultimate prize. I now owned the perfect, expensive, silent apartment. Yet, I sat there, looking at the city lights, feeling the profound, solitary chill of a man who had everything but the one thing he could never buy back, the years of struggle shared with someone who cared. I had defeated the system, but the victory was lonely. I realized I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace, and their continuing attempts to reclaim me threatened that peace every single day. They kept pushing, kept appealing to an imagined family bond that had never existed. The truth is, I don't owe them the money. I don't owe them the explanation. I don't owe them the reconciliation they desperately need to soothe their conscience. I owe my success to the hungry, desperate, 26-year-old version of me who chose self-respect over conditional comfort. My final act of autonomy is to decide where the line must be drawn. Do I forgive them the debt of abandonment and find peace in silence, or do I use my power to make them understand the true cost of what they threw away? If the people who ignored you all your life suddenly claimed you back, desperately needing your financial power, would you finally give them the help they never gave you, or would you remain absolutely silent? I want to know what you think. Let me know your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.